And welcome back. In this tutorial I'm going to talk about the MouseMoved event that is part of the Witty library. It is part of the Witty text widget, which is mostly what we've been focusing on in this series. So let's go ahead and get started to see how that is implemented. Right now I have a Komodo project called MouseMoved event, or I should say I do not have a project called MouseMoved event. I have one called MouseMove event, and what I want to go ahead and do is change this project so that it says MouseMoved. So we go in here, we find a location. In my case it's under the libraries, projects library, my projects, and projects. You can put it anywhere that you so desire. Going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it MouseMoved event, and the project is going to be called MouseMoved event. Komodo will prompt you, or you can just check this checkbox. I'm going to click on yes to add the extension, close all current files. I'm going to open the right hand pane if it was not already open, and click on a Witty project, and then what we're going to do is go ahead and run CMake to generate our make files. Then I'm going to go under the source folder, open the main file, and let's go ahead and get rid of a couple of headers here. I'm going to get rid of the Witty label. I'm going to replace it with a Witty text. So now we have our Witty text, and now I'm going to create a Witty text widget. I'm going to call it response, and this is nothing new here. And actually I need to move this, okay? And I'm going to just, I'm not going to add any text to it quite yet. I'm going to call approot. So now we have a Witty text object, and I'm going to resize this. And you can do this any way that you would want to. I'm just going to leave the width as is. You can do this with the enumerator with the value of Witty length and the value of auto, or you could just say the Witty length constructor. I'm just going to use the enumerator. And for the height, you can do this any way you so desire. I'm just going to make it 960 pixels. So there's our length, or our height, and here is the unit. We're going to use pixels. And then I'm going to set the text alignment, and you'll understand why when I do this. I'm just going to center all text in the middle of the page, on the top of the page as well. So now our text is centered. So now we're done with the response object. Next thing we want to do, we want to make some changes to the Witty container. So we have the approot. I'm going to call the decoration style object. I'm going to set the background color, and I'm going to make it blue. We need to get access to the Witty color. And again, if you've been watching our video so far, if you don't understand everything when it comes to setting the background color using the decoration style object, I will have a whole series on how to use this object, which is part of the Witty CSS decoration style class. It allows you to set some limited amount, so it has some limited functionality when it comes to CSS. So now we're going to set the foreground color, which is your text, and I'm going to make that white. Okay, and now we have that. Now we want to resize this widget. I'm going to call root again and resize. And what I'm going to do with this, instead of me typing that all over again, let's just take this, because it's going to be the same thing. I just wanted to make the response object, which is going to be a child, or it already is a child, of the root container the same size. So now that we've done that, and now what I want to do is actually get access to our event, our signal, and add a slot. So we're going to call the MouseMoved event, and we have the connect object. Now we haven't created this slot yet, but we're going to call it MouseMoved. And that's pretty much it for the actual application, at least for the meat of it. Now we just need to create our slot, or our method or our function that we're going to use. So we have void MouseMoved const, and this takes, now you could also have done this using a lambda, but then I mean, I haven't seen an example of it. You wouldn't be able to get access to the actual event itself, this parameter right here, the mouse event. So that's why I'm doing it the way that I'm doing it here. So there's the signature at the top. I'm going to call this MouseMoved, and there's our actual parameter. Okay, and now we can start to see what is it that we want to do. So in our example, the MouseMoved, if we bring up the Witty documentation, now that we have our code, this is really the meat and potatoes of it right here. I'm in the Witty text documentation, and actually let's go up to the top. So we have the Witty text, and it inherits from all these classes. You have your interactive widget, web widget, the widget, of course, the Witty widget. We're looking for the interactive widget, and we want to find the MouseMoved. We click on it, and it says the event signal emitted when the mouse moved over this widget. The mouse event contains information on buttons currently pressed. So what we want to know is, what are the coordinates on the screen when the mouse moves over our widget? So in our case, we want to get the X and Y coordinates. Well, how do you get the X and Y coordinates? Well, the first thing we want to do is get access to our response object. So we create a instance of it. Now we need to do some casting. We're going to use a static cast, and of course this basically is saying, you know, programmer, you're on your own. You better make sure that this object actually exists, because if it does not, you're going to get an error. And then we're going to get access to the global Witty application object. It's basically, when you do this, you're getting access to this application object right here that we need for our application to run. And so we get access to root, and root is a Witty container, and there's a method called widget, and you take in the index of the widget that you want to access. And since when we added one widget, the index is going to be 0. Everything starts at 0 in C++. Okay, and now that we have the response object, we just do it like we usually do. We set text, and I want to add a Witty string to this. So now we have a Witty string. Okay, now let's make this a little bit more legible. Let's tab this, and we want to add, we're going to add a header or a heading. Apologize for that, and we're going to do another one. Okay, we have two headings, and basically we want to do the X and our first placeholder, which starts with the number 1, and we're going to do the Y. And our second placeholder. So now we have two placeholders of where the X and Y coordinates are going to be. So now we need to add the actual arguments. So we have our Witty string, and remember, Witty strings can take arguments. So we have two arguments here, argument 1 and argument 2. So now we're going to actually add what are the arguments. Well, now we have access to the Witty Mouse event through this variable that we created, and now we can say, okay, how do we get access to that? Well, we call the widget, the actual widget that is attached to this event. How did I know that? Well, if you look at the mouse moved, and we know it takes a mouse event as a parameter because of this signal, which is basically nothing more than a method, and we click on the mouse event and we look to see, okay, how does this give us access to the X and Y coordinates? Well, you have a slew of coordinates here, and I'll show you a little trick that I did. If you go to the Witty widgets, the Witty library, the Witty widgets library, the gallery on the front page, and if you go under, let's see, paintbrush, and if you look at paintbrush, from their example, they show you they have the mouse dragged, mouse went down, touch started, touch moved, a slew of events that you can actually construct. And just look at the signature, mouse event, and then they have coordinates, and they show you how they get access to those coordinates. So they're creating a coordinate object which is comprised from getting access to the widget that is attached to that event, the actual widget that actually generates that event, and then get access to the X and Y coordinates. So for our example, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're getting access to the actual event that's going to be generated. In our case, it's the mouse moved, and the widget that makes that event happen, and then we just call in .x. And I'll show you that from, again, let's look at the documentation. If we look at the core, well, you're not actually getting access to the actual widget, but this is actually a coordinate object. If we click on this, I should say it's not the actual widget, it's the actual coordinate attached to the widget. So we look at coordinates, and here's the coordinates. You click on coordinates, and it is a struct, and it has the X and Y coordinates attached to that event. So this will show us the X and Y coordinates that is generated by the Witty library. So we have the X. Now we need to get the Y, and that's basically it. Once you get the X and the Y, and as you can see, they're integer values. So we have the X and the Y. So we have the event, the coordinates that are generated from that event, and then we actually access the X and the Y. Now you could have done this by saying, you could have created an object of type coordinates. You could have did like this. It's equal to the event that is generated, the coordinates that it comes from, and then, from there, I guess we want to give it a value, C, and then you can say C dot X or C dot Y, and then you could have access to the coordinates. But in our case, we just want to actually get access to them directly. So as you can see, we have e.widget.x, e.widget.y, and enough talking. Let's go ahead and compile this, see if it runs. Hopefully we didn't make any errors. Okay, looks good on our first attempt. And if we run this, and if you're on Windows, it's going to prompt you. Just click on Allow Access. Server is up and running. Let's go to the Witty documentation. And I already have this open. Here's localhost. Here's localhost. Let's get rid of this. Okay, and as you can see, we set the background color to blue. Remember that. And we made it 960 pixels long. And if you had a bigger, a long monitor, you could see this better. But as you can see, all we're doing is recording the actual X and Y coordinates on the screen. So if you go all the way to the far left and to the right, it's almost at 0, 0. Okay, we got 1, 0. And as you can see, if you go all the way down, go all the way across, you can't see it, but take my word for it, it's actually giving you the coordinates everywhere that's on the screen. So that's basically how you use MouseMoved. Basically, once you get access, MouseMoved is telling you, okay, generate this event every time the mouse is moved over this widget. In our case, all we're doing is recording the coordinates that is being displayed for this widget, our Witty text widget that spans this entire page. And that's basically it. I mean, it's a pretty neat way for you to record what's going on your screen. It's a pretty neat example of showing you how MouseMoved event. You can think of different ways of doing this. So I hope I inspired you to think of ideas of how to use that event. And I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye-bye.